Hey everyone, this video is brought to you by Loan United. They're the mortgage lender that I went with when I bought my house back in August. If they don't give you the best rate, then they give you $250 in cash. And in my case, they did give me the best rate without having to buy down any points. With the way the housing market is, home buyers desperately need a win. So click the link in the description to learn more. And now, let's get down to business. I made a few videos about real estate back when I was working on buying my own house. And each time in the comments section, I could just see you guys chomping at the bit to talk about the impacts of low housing inventory. All my bravado about seizing the means of accommodation from our corporate landlords cannot overshadow the simple fact that we do not have enough houses for everybody. It wouldn't matter how many houses Invitation Homes is buying if we had enough houses to go around. But the problem is, we don't. So at long last, let's talk about the economics of why houses are getting prohibitively expensive, especially to the middle class. House size and material and labor costs are two reasons why houses are getting more expensive, and we'll talk about those first. But the largest factor, in my opinion, are the NIMBYs and their politics. But let's take it from the top. The first reason why houses are getting more expensive than ever is that they're getting larger. In the 1950s, when the boomers were being born, the average house was 1,000 square feet. By the 1980s, it was up to 1,600 square feet. In year 2000, the average house was 2,100 square feet, and today, the average house being built is 2,500 square feet. That's a lot more material and a lot more labor going into building these houses. Back in the day, you had 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms on 1 story for 5 people. Today, your average house for a married couple is 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, 2 living rooms, and a home office. If you add 1 kid to that mix, now you're looking at buying a 4-bedroom house. People are future-proofing for kids that don't exist yet. And with so many people working from home, now you need that additional flex space for your home office. A regular suburban cookie-cutter neighborhood in 2022 would look like a row of mansions in the 1960s. All that increased material and labor is just one reason why houses are getting more expensive. Another reason is that those materials and labor cost more money than they ever have before. In the mid-80s, lumber was $150 for 1,000 feet. It generally fluctuated between $200 and $500 until the COVID pandemic, when the whole thing just took off. Lumber peaked at almost $1,700 in 2021, and then it has since come off, but is still floating around $600 today. So not only do you need twice as much lumber to build a modern house, but the price of that lumber is double what it was in just 2019. This also means you're spending 8 times as much on lumber as our parents did in the 80s. These increased costs aren't because of inflation. They are the inflation. And because of the COVID pandemic, you're talking about 2 years of backed up construction. People didn't want to buy houses when it cost you $1.70 per foot of lumber, if they could even find labor to begin with. All of that backed up demand is just getting pushed to the right. And that's how we're going to wind up with lumber prices that stay historically high. Concrete prices are also up 3 times from the 80s and 8 times from the 70s. Even in just the past 2 years, the cost of concrete is up 15%. We don't just need more concrete for our bigger house, but the concrete that we need is significantly more expensive. The same thing is going to be true for almost every single material that goes into building a house. And once you start adding in things like smart wiring and energy efficient windows, you're making your house better, but you're also making it a lot more expensive. Bigger and better houses are one thing, but they can't be the only reason that houses are getting prohibitively expensive. There is demand for affordable housing. So why is the free market not providing? The answer, and the most important reason in my opinion, are the NIMBYs. This acronym stands for Not in My Backyard. That's a term used to describe somebody who supports a certain piece of infrastructure or a social movement as long as they personally don't have to experience it. For example, a NIMBY might say that they support homeless shelters, but you don't want to build any near them because they don't want their kids to be exposed to those types of people. Or the NIMBY might say that they support open borders with Mexico because that's the fair and humane thing to do, as long as the immigrants stay in California and Texas. But the NIMBY doesn't have to be quite that hypocritical. What all NIMBYs have in common is that they are very protective of their real estate. When someone moves into a large single-family house, they want the value of that property to stay high, especially if it's their only valuable asset. A great way to protect that home's value is to make sure that other houses in the area are of similar size and value, also owned by other high-income earners. NIMBYs will say that they support affordable housing in their bustling downtown, but they don't want to see any multifamily buildings actually being put up, because that would put downward pressure on the value of their own home. But what gives the NIMBY power? Why does the NIMBY get to decide what gets built? This is where we get into zoning laws and regulations. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development determined that regulations and zoning laws can increase the price of houses by 35%, prevent affordable homes from being built, and stop the free market from filling the demand. If a NIMBY can stop a certain area from being zoned for multifamily units, then a triplex or an apartment building will never get built in that area. Supply of housing cannot catch up to demand, and that means that prices will continue to rise with no downward pressure. This is a good way to keep poor people out of your neighborhood too, because they'll never be able to afford to live there. The NIMBY might say that they support affordable housing, but they don't want it anywhere near them. They would rather see those people bust in or drive themselves to that part of the city, rather than actually live where they work. Zoning is a very powerful weapon. It gives local governments the right to decide who housing supports. But state zoning is typically about safety. For example, you can't build your house within 50 meters of the cemetery, or you can't build your raw sewage reclamation plant within this residential neighborhood. But the state governments can pass what's called enabling acts. Those are acts that allow local governments to regulate their own zoning laws. That is when local governments can start getting really petty, when they're handed this huge gun. Local governments can pass zoning laws that stop multifamily construction in its tracks. And these local governments are chock full of NIMBYs because that's the type of person that has the inclination and the time to get involved in local politics. And other NIMBYs that vote in local elections support all their decisions. So to the young people that want affordable housing, what's the message here? Should we be getting out to vote? Yes, we should be voting in our local elections, but that's not the point that I want to make here. We should care about our local elections even down to the HOA level, but I don't think get out and vote is going to be the answer to our housing crisis. We don't need to get out and vote. We need to get out and run. Fixing our housing crisis is going to require more production, but that increased production is meaningless if we don't fix the way we handle zoning. I know you can get a lot farther in elections in the United States with slogans like, "Protect our children and take our country back," while you talk about the next boogeyman like critical race theory, than you can talking about zoning regulations. But if we really want to protect our children and take our country back, we need to make sure that their families have affordable housing, and when they grow up, they have affordable housing. Otherwise, this chain of poverty never breaks. People think that affordable housing looks like this: drugs, robbery, people out on bail, houses falling apart. But that's not what affordable housing has to look like. This is affordable housing. It's clean, it has character, it's in walking distance to things. It's got mixed residential and commercial use, so you can actually feel like you're living in a community. It's nice. We want neighborhoods to look like this. But NIMBYs would rather see one single family house here instead, and the other 6 families have to rent apartments 30 minutes away and drive or bus themselves into the city. This is a major factor in our housing crisis. So if you can't tell, I really don't like NIMBYs. I think they're selfish and hypocritical. But more importantly, this rant is in some ways a call to action. Not every factor in our housing crisis, like interest rates and construction costs, is out of our control. We do get a say in what gets built, and it's our own local governments that are setting up the most roadblocks. This is the level of government that we can most easily affect. So yes, vote, but also run. And the day is going to come when I run on this platform as well, although that might be a few years down the road. If you're interested in urban planning, I recommend the YouTube channel Not Just Bikes. It's got some great videos and really awesome ideas. You'll definitely want to check that channel out. And again, if you're on the market for a house, I strongly recommend Loan United. They got my mortgage application done a lot faster than any of their competitors, and they gave me the best rate without having to buy down points. If they cannot do the same for you, they give you a $250 check. So either way, you win. Check them out with the link in the description and they'll get you hooked up. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you have a great week. I'll see you next time.